The enemy from the stars, the red sky burned above the battlefield. Smoke and fire covered the land as the war between humans and the immortal alien race called the Ve'ari raged on. Commander Daniel Cross stood on the edge of a ruined wall, scanning the horizon through the heat and dust. He had fought for years, and his men trusted him with their lives. Today's mission was dangerous, but it might end the war. Reports said the Ve'ari queen herself was leading her army here. If they could capture her, it might force the aliens to negotiate peace. The ground shook as alien machines moved closer. The sound of their weapons echoed like thunder. Daniel raised his hand, signaling his squad to hold their fire until the right moment. He knew the Ve'ari were stronger, faster, and almost impossible to kill. But humans had something they didn't: the will to fight even when hope was gone. Suddenly, through the smoke, he saw her, tall, graceful, and deadly. The queen of the Ve'ari moved like a silver flame. Her armor shone under the red sky, and her silver eyes were cold and sharp. She was Liara, the name whispered like a curse among soldiers. It was said she had lived for hundreds of years, never aging, never losing a battle. Daniel's squad moved in, cutting off her escape blaster. Fire lit the ruins, and alien shields sparked with energy. Liara fought like lightning, her blade cutting through steel. But then, a blast from above shattered part of the wall, sending her crashing to the ground. Her leg was pinned under heavy debris, and her weapon was gone. Daniel approached carefully, his weapon ready. One pull of the trigger could end the war. Liara looked up at him, breathing hard but still proud. "Do it, human," she said, her voice like cold glass. Her silver eyes met his, without fear, but Daniel hesitated. Something in her gaze was not hatred, it was loneliness. He lowered his weapon, against every rule he knew. Instead, he called for 2 soldiers to help lift the debris. The soldiers looked at him in shock, but obeyed. Liara stood slowly, her leg bleeding, her face unreadable. "You spared me," she said quietly, as if testing the words. "I don't know why," Daniel replied. Liara tilted her head, studying him like a strange puzzle. "One day, human, I will repay this debt," she said, "but not in the way you expect." Before Daniel could answer, her people arrived in a burst of light. They pulled her away, disappearing into the haze of war. The sound of alien ships filled the air, and soon she was gone. Daniel stood there, wondering if he had just made a terrible mistake. Around him, the battlefield fell silent for the first time in hours. But in his mind, her words kept echoing, "Not in the way you expect." As the sun dipped below the horizon, Daniel knew this war was far from over, but he also knew that something had changed. A single choice, made in a heartbeat, had tied his fate to the most dangerous woman in the galaxy, and deep inside, he felt that the real battle had only just begun. A world without war. 5 years had passed since the day Daniel spared the queen of the Ve'ari. The war that once filled the skies with fire and blood had ended. Replaced by a fragile peace, human cities began to rebuild. Alien ships no longer circled above with weapons ready. Trade routes opened between worlds, and for the first time in history, humans walked openly on Ve'ari soil. Daniel, once a soldier, was now a peace envoy, traveling between planets to keep the fragile agreement alive. He had almost forgotten her face. Almost, but sometimes at night, he would still remember the silver eyes watching him with quiet fire. The words she had spoken, promising to repay a debt, still whispered in his mind. One bright afternoon, Daniel stepped out of a human embassy on the alien capital world. The city was a breathtaking mix of crystal towers, glowing bridges, and strange floating gardens. The air shimmered with colors he had never seen on Earth. Crowds of humans and Ve'ari moved together, their steps cautious but peaceful. He was heading toward the transport docks when the crowd suddenly parted. At first he thought it was a security patrol. Then he saw her, Liara, the queen he had once faced on the battlefield. She was not in her silver armor now. Instead, she wore flowing robes of deep blue, embroidered with stars. A crown of white crystal rested on her head. She walked with the grace of someone born to rule. Yet there was something different in her eyes, softer but guarded. "Commander Cross," she said, her voice carrying across the street. Daniel stopped, unsure how to respond. No one had called him that in years. "Queen Liara," he replied, bowing slightly. Her lips curved in the faintest smile. "It seems fate has brought us together again," she said. "I think you owe me an explanation." Daniel replied, his tone calm, but curious. She tilted her head, the same way she had years ago. "Perhaps I do," she said. "Walk with me." They moved through the quiet pathways of a private garden behind the palace. The air was scented with alien flowers that glowed faintly in the shade. Fountains of liquid light spilled into pools, casting ripples on their faces. Liara stopped near a silver tree, its leaves whispering in a language neither wind nor water could speak. "I have a problem," she said simply. "A problem only you can solve." Daniel frowned. "I'm no longer a soldier," he said. "This is not about war." Liara interrupted, her eyes fixed on his. "It is about life." She stepped closer, the soft glow of the garden reflecting in her eyes. "For centuries, I have been cursed with immortality," she said. "Nothing can end my life, but I can never bring new life into the world." Daniel hesitated, unsure where this was leading. "I've searched for a way to break the curse," she continued. "And I found it." She paused, watching his reaction. "It requires that I bear a child with a human whose blood carries a rare genetic key," she said slowly. "And your bloodline is one of the few that has it." The words hung in the air like a blade between them. Daniel's breath caught. "You're asking me?" "Yes," she interrupted, her voice calm but filled with something deeper. "I want you to be the father of my child." Daniel stared at her, wondering if this was a political game. "Why me?" he asked finally. "Because you spared me," she said. "Because you showed me something I had never seen in a human, mercy without weakness." Her gaze softened. "I once despised you, Daniel Cross," she admitted, "but now I see you differently." Silence settled in the garden, broken only by the whisper of silver leaves. Daniel looked at her, realizing this was not just about breaking a curse. It was about choosing a life and a future that could change both their worlds and maybe his own heart. The Queen's request. The silver leaves of the alien tree shimmered softly in the garden. Daniel stood still, his mind trying to process the Queen's words. A request like this was not something he had ever imagined. Lyra's face remained calm, but her eyes held a storm. "This is not a trick, Daniel," she said quietly. "I am not asking for politics or treaties. I am asking for a life." Daniel took a slow breath, his voice low. "You're saying if you have a child with M.E., you'll lose your immortality?" Lyra nodded once. "Yes," she said. "And once it is gone, I will age, I will weaken, and I will die like any human." Her words felt heavy in the air. For the Vayari, immortality was more than a gift. It was their identity. To give it up was to step away from everything their kind valued. "Why?" Daniel asked simply. Lyra's gaze softened. "Because eternity is not life," she whispered. "I have seen centuries pass. I have watched empires rise and fall, but I have never felt the weight of time. I want to feel it. I want to know joy, pain, love, and fear before my time ends." Daniel searched her expression for deception, but saw none. She meant every word. Still, his soldier's mind warned him of the risks. "Both our people will hate this," he said. "They will not accept it." "I know," Liara replied, her voice steady, "but I am queen, and my choice is mine to make." She stepped closer, her presence almost pulling the air around her. "When you spared me, you gave me a reason to believe that some humans are worth trusting. That trust is why I am here now." Daniel shook his head slightly. "You barely know me." Lyra's lips curved in a faint smile. I have lived long enough to know that a single act can reveal more than years of words. The sound of distant music drifted from the palace. It was a soft melody, slow and filled with longing. Liara looked toward the light of the hall but stayed where she was. "Think carefully, Daniel Cross," she said. "This is not only about me. If we do this, our child will be both human and Vayari. They will belong to both worlds and to neither." Daniel imagined the life of such a child, a bridge between species, a symbol of hope or a target of hate. He felt the weight of the choice pressing down on him. "Why tell me all of this now?" he asked. "Because time is running out," Liara answered. "My enemies are growing bold, and my throne is not as secure as it appears. If I do not act soon, they will take away my right to choose my own future." A sudden rustle in the shadows made Daniel's hand go to his sidearm. From behind the silver tree, a figure in dark armor stepped forward. The queen's personal guard, tall and silent. Liara glanced at the guard and then back at Daniel. "They are here to make sure you leave this garden alive," she said calmly. "But they are also here to protect this secret until you decide." Daniel's eyes narrowed. "You mean?" "I don't have to answer now," Liara nodded slowly. "But the longer you wait, the more danger there will be for both of us." The guard stepped back into the shadows, disappearing as silently as they came. Lyra's eyes never left Daniel's. "When you decide, come to the Temple of Stars," she said. "You will know the way." Daniel felt the moment stretching. He could walk away and never see her again. Or he could take the first step into something that might change the fate of two worlds. He turned to leave, but stopped and looked back. "Liara," he said softly, "if I do this, it won't be for politics." Her lips curved into the faintest smile. "I wouldn't want it any other way," she replied, as Daniel walked out of the garden. The alien moonlight faded behind him. In the quiet of the palace halls, Liara stood, alone beneath the silver tree, her immortal heart beating just a little faster. For the first time in centuries, she felt the touch of uncertainty and hope. The price of mortality. The night air on the alien capital was cool and sharp. Daniel stood on the balcony of his guest quarters, looking at the city lights stretching into the horizon. The Vayari world was beautiful, almost too perfect. Every building shimmered. Every street was spotless. Every sound felt carefully arranged. But under that beauty, Daniel sensed a tension. The peace between humans and Vayari was a thin thread, and any wrong move could cut it. He thought of Liara's words in the garden, giving up immortality. For a human, life had always been limited. But for the Vayari, to willingly lose eternity was something close to madness. Why would she risk everything for something as uncertain as a child? Daniel couldn't shake the question from his mind. The next morning, he was summoned to the palace. This time, not to the open gardens, but to a chamber deep within the royal wing. Guards scanned him with strange devices before allowing him inside. The room was dim, its walls covered in shifting light patterns that felt alive. Liara stood in the center, dressed in dark gold robes, her crown absent. She looked less like a queen and more like a woman preparing for something dangerous. "You came," she said quietly. Daniel nodded. "You said there was more I needed to know." Liara's silver eyes locked on his. "Yes," she replied. "If I give up my immortality, it will not only change me, it will weaken my hold on the throne." Daniel frowned. "How?" "My people see immortality as a sign of divine favor," she explained. "If I lose it, they will see me as unfit to rule. My enemies will move against me, and I will be vulnerable. Not only as a ruler, but as a person." She moved closer, her voice steady but low. "That is the price," she said. "I will gain the chance to live and love as humans do, but I will also gain fear, the fear of losing everything." She placed her hand on the table between them, where a small crystal sphere rested, glowing faintly. "This is part of the ritual," she said. "When it shatters, my immortality will leave me, and I will be like you." Daniel stared at the sphere. It looked fragile, almost harmless, Yet he could feel a strange hum in the air around it. "And once it's done?" he asked. "There is no way back," Liara answered. "Once the thread of eternity is cut, it can never be restored." Silence settled between them. Daniel could feel the weight of her choice pressing into the room like a storm about to break. "You're ready to risk everything for this," he said. "Yes," she replied without hesitation. "Because eternity without meaning is worse than death." Before Daniel could answer, a sudden noise echoed outside the chamber. A guard burst, in his armor scorched. "Your Majesty, there was an attack on the outer gates," he said. "Human extremists. They demand the Queen step down." Lyra's jaw tightened, but her voice stayed calm. "See that they are removed without bloodshed," she ordered. The guard bowed and left. The door sealing behind him, Daniel's mind raced. "If this is already happening, your enemies will only grow bolder once you give up your immortality," he said. "I know," Liara replied, "but that is why I must choose now, before the choice is taken from me." She stepped back toward the sphere, her fingers brushing its surface. "It will happen in the Temple of Stars," she said, "under the light of the twin moons." Her eyes met his, sharp and unwavering. "If you are with me, you will stand beside me when I break it." Daniel exhaled slowly. "You're asking me to stand against two worlds." "I'm asking you to stand with me," she corrected. Outside, the distant hum of the city continued, unaware that its queen was planning to give up the very thing that made her untouchable. Inside the chamber, Daniel knew the next step would bind them together in a way that neither politics nor war ever could. And for the first time, he realized he might be willing to pay the price too. Against two worlds, the news spread faster than fire in dry grass. Rumors whispered through alien streets and human outposts alike. The Queen of the Veyari was planning something unthinkable, giving up her immortality. No one knew why. Some claimed it was for love, others said it was a dangerous political trick. But one thing was certain, both humans and Veyari had people who wanted it stopped. Daniel walked through the crowded market square of the alien capital. The usual bright lights and music felt muted today. Eyes followed him from every corner, some filled with curiosity, others with quiet hostility. His role as peace envoy had made him a familiar face. But now he was being watched for a very different reason. That evening, as the alien moons began to rise, a messenger found him at the embassy. The young Veyari woman looked nervous, her hands clutching a sealed letter. "It is from the Queen," she whispered. Daniel broke the seal and read quickly. Her words were short and urgent. "There are forces moving against us. Come to the palace tonight." When he arrived, the palace guards were doubled, their weapons ready. Inside, Liara stood with a small group of trusted advisors. Maps and holographic charts floated in the air, showing movement in both human and Veyari territories. "It's worse than I thought," she said. "Some human military leaders believe our union would be a betrayal, and some Veyari believe it would be the end of our purity." Daniel studied the charts. "They're working together," he said. "Yes," Liara replied grimly. "They fear what our child would represent, the end of separation between our species." A deep boom shook the chamber. Dust fell from the high ceiling as a guard ran in. "An explosive at the east wall, no casualties," he reported. "But it was meant to send a message." Lyra's gaze darkened. "They will try again," she said. "And next time, they will not care if they spill blood." Later that night, Daniel stood at the balcony outside her private chambers. The city below glowed with alien light, but pockets of shadow hid dangers. Liara stepped beside him, her voice low. "We are running out of time," she said. "The Temple of Stars will only be open for the ritual once every 10 years, and that night is 3 days away." Daniel turned to her. "If we go through with this, we'll be hunted." Lyra's eyes met his without flinching. "Then we will run faster," she said. "But I will not live another decade as a prisoner of my own eternity." Before Daniel could answer, a sudden crack of glass rang out. The balcony rail shattered as a sharp projectile embedded itself where Liara had been standing moments before. Daniel pulled her back inside, drawing his sidearm. Guards swarmed the room, searching for the assassin, but found only an empty rooftop across the courtyard. "They are getting closer," Daniel said. "Yes," Liara replied, "and the closer they get, the more I know I am making the right choice." Over the next 2 days, the attacks grew bolder. A poisoned cup meant for Liara was intercepted by her guard. A human transport ship was sabotaged to make it look like the Queen's doing. Both worlds teetered on the edge of mistrust. Daniel and Liara met in secret, finalizing their plan to reach the temple. They would leave under the cover of night, traveling through old underground passageways known only to the oldest members of the Royal Guard. On the last night before the journey, Daniel found Liara alone in the Silverleaf Garden, the same place where she had first asked him for this choice. She was holding the glowing crystal sphere in her hands, its light steady but fragile. "When this breaks, I will become like you," she said softly. "And when that happens, every second will matter." Daniel looked at her. "I'll protect every second," he promised. Lyra's lips curved in a rare smile. "Then we will face the next world together," she said. Somewhere in the city, another explosion echoed, but neither of them turned to look, because they both knew the real storm would begin at the Temple of Stars. The final decision. The night was colder than usual. Twin moons hung low over the alien capital, casting silver light across empty streets. Daniel moved quickly through the hidden passage beneath the palace, his footsteps silent on the smooth stone. Beside him, Liara kept pace, her face calm but her eyes sharp. Behind them, 2 loyal guards carried the glowing crystal sphere wrapped in dark cloth. Every turn they took seemed to lead them deeper into the earth. The air grew cooler, the sound of the city fading away, replaced by the slow drip of underground water. The Temple of Stars was hidden far from the public eye. It was not just a place of worship, it was a place of transformation. Only once every 10 years did the moons align, so that the temple's central chamber was bathed in the pure light needed for the ritual. And tonight was that night. If they missed this chance, the next one would come too late. As they emerged from the tunnel, the temple rose before them, a massive structure carved into the side of a black mountain, its surface glittering with countless tiny lights. The twin moons shone directly above it, their light reflecting off the stone like liquid silver. For a moment, Daniel simply stared, feeling the weight of what was about to happen. Inside, the air was warm and still. The walls glowed faintly, etched with patterns that seemed to move when he looked too long. At the center of the chamber stood a circular platform, surrounded by shallow water that rippled without wind. Liara stepped forward, removing her crown and placing it on the edge of the platform. She turned to Daniel. "This is where I end one life and begin another," she said. Daniel's hand tightened on the strap of his weapon. He had felt danger before, but this was different. Somehow, the air itself seemed to sense the choice they were making. The guards placed the sphere on a pedestal. In the center of the platform, its glow pulsing slowly. "This crystal holds the thread of my eternity," Liara said. "When I break it, the power will leave me forever." Suddenly, the sound of footsteps echoed from the temple entrance. Daniel spun, weapon raised, from the shadows. Armed figures emerged, both human and Veyari, the enemies who had hunted them, had found their way here. "Step away from the Queen," one of the human soldiers shouted. "She belongs to no one but her people." A Veyari warrior snarled back. The chamber erupted in chaos. Daniel fired a warning shot, forcing the attackers to scatter behind the pillars. Liara moved toward the sphere, her robes sweeping across the platform. A blast of energy struck near her feet, sending shards of stone into the water. Daniel shouted, "Do it now." She reached for the sphere, but one of the human soldiers charged the platform. Daniel intercepted him, knocking the weapon from his hands before slamming him into the water. Another Veyari warrior lunged at Liara, blade raised. One of her guards blocked the strike. The sound of metal ringing through the temple, The sphere's glow began to change. The moons had reached their perfect alignment, casting a beam of pure silver light directly onto the pedestal. Liara looked at Daniel, just for a second, and then brought her hands down on the sphere. It shattered like glass, but instead of shards, a wave of light burst outward. The force hit everyone in the chamber, knocking them back. Daniel felt warmth rush over him, and when he looked at Liara, he saw the change. Her immortal glow was gone. Her eyes still held their silver hue, but now there was something else, fragility. Her breathing was heavier, her skin slightly warmer. She was mortal. The remaining attackers hesitated, as if unsure what to do now. Daniel stepped forward, weapon ready, his voice cold. "Leave," he said. One by one, they backed away, disappearing into the shadows. The sound of their retreat faded until only the quiet ripple of the water remained. Liara stepped down from the platform, her hand brushing Daniel's arm for balance. "It's done," she said softly. Daniel looked at her for a long moment. "Now the real fight begins," he said, outside the temple. The first light of dawn was breaking, but for them, the night was far from over. A new dawn. The journey back from the Temple of Stars was slow. Liara moved with the steady but careful steps of someone no longer shielded by eternity. Daniel walked close beside her, his eyes scanning every shadow along the road. The guards stayed behind them, silent and watchful. The morning air was cool, carrying the scent of distant rain, but beneath it was the faint metallic tang of danger. They had survived the night, but both knew the threats were far from gone. The capital city was waking as they entered its outskirts. Market stalls opened, merchants called out in soft voices. But the moment people saw Liara walking without her usual glow, whispers began to spread. Some looked shocked, others fearful, a few even angry. For the first time in centuries, their queen looked like one of them, and for the first time, she could feel the weight of every gaze. In the palace, the council chamber was waiting. The room was filled with both human and Veyari leaders. Tension thickened the air like smoke. Daniel walked in first, his presence enough to silence the murmurs. Then Liara stepped forward, no crown, no armor, only the quiet strength in her eyes. "I have given up my immortality," she said, her voice calm but unyielding. Gasps echoed around the room. "You have thrown away our greatest gift." One elder shouted, "You have surrendered to the humans." Another accused. Liara raised a hand, and the room fell silent. "I have chosen life over eternity," she said. "I have chosen a future where our two peoples are not enemies." Her gaze swept across the room, sharp and steady. "If that future begins with me, then so be it." The arguments lasted for hours. Some leaders demanded she step down. Others saw the value in her choice. By the end, no final decision had been reached. But one thing was clear: the balance of power had shifted, and there was no going back. That evening, Daniel found her in the Silverleaf Garden. She was sitting on the same bench where she had once told him of her curse. Only now the curse was gone. Her hands rested on her lap, one of them holding a small carved figure, a gift from a human child in the market. "They fear what they don't understand," Daniel said, stepping closer. "They always will," Liara replied. "But fear is not the same as hate." The moons rose above the city, casting pale light over the garden. For the first time, Liara felt the cool night breeze on her skin as something real. She could feel her heart beat faster when Daniel stood near. Every breath she took felt more precious. "This is what I wanted," she said softly. "To feel the seconds pass, to know they will not come again." Daniel sat beside her. "And the child?" he asked quietly. Liara smiled faintly, her hand brushing her stomach. "In time," she said. "First, we must survive what comes next." The following weeks were not easy. Assassins still tried to reach her. Rumors still spread like wildfire. But slowly, small signs of change began to appear. A human merchant and a Veyari artisan opened a shop together. Mixed patrols of soldiers began walking the streets without incident. Children from both species played in the palace courtyard, their laughter echoing under the twin moons. One early morning, Daniel stood on the balcony and watched the city below. Liara joined him, her robe brushing against his arm. "It's strange," she said. "I gave up eternity, and yet this feels like forever." Daniel looked at her. "Forever isn't about time," he said. "It's about the people you share it with." She leaned against him. In the distance, the first rays of the sun broke over the horizon. The city slowly filled with light. Liara closed her eyes, feeling the warmth on her skin. And for the first time since the curse had been lifted, she let herself imagine the child they would raise. A bridge between two worlds. A living proof that even the deepest divides could be crossed. In that moment, she knew her choice had been worth every risk. She had given up immortality and gained something far greater.